Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, and welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for your association and attendance as we continue today with Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 15, verses 32 to 44. The Pandavas retire timely. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadam Tika. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Paparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Shastra Piyusha Sarva Vedeka Satphala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Tritprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalidvando Didatitya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you are enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O light breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga, you actual Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshasha Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namaste. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. By reading one attains transcendental bliss, for your silvers rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for your incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madekabandhu Mad Sangim Mad Guru Man Mahadana Man Nishtaraka Mad Bhagya Madananda Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisances unto you. Asadu sadhu tadahin, atini chochataraka, anamuncha kada chinmam premna harit katyospura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O give of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplift to the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest in Mahatma Trove, accompanying pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Janmadyasya Yatonvayadi Taratas Charte Swabhigna Swara, Tene Brahma Hedaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya, Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatrati Sargom Risha, Damna Swena Sada Nirastakwakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, destructions of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations and is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he who only first imparted Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages of demigods are placed into illusion as one is bewildered by the illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent and transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayanal Paisha Sabya Kalabasmin Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagyupadartha. O Lord, oneness, ainage of Kali, many but short lives, are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all ways disturbed. Narayan Namaskritya Narachevam Narotamam Devim Saraswatyam Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Narayan, unto Narayan, which is the supermost human being, and the Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and the Srila Vyasa, the author. Savai pumsa parodharmo yata bhaktiradokshaja ahitagya prati yata yayatma suprasiditi. The supreme occupation, dharma for all humanity, is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatchusa Vairagyam Jnanam Chayadahitukam. A rendering devotional service under the personal God Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causes knowledge from. One immediately acquires causes knowledge and detachment from the world. Vedanti tat pravidas tattvam yat gnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learn the transcendentalists who know the absolute truth called as non-dual substance, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Shrushushrosha Dharanasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchi Syan Mahatsave Avitra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains finity for hearing the message of Vasudeva. Shrinutam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Yadantastaya Bhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of God, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of truthful devotee, cleanses desire from material enjoyment. From the heart of the devotees developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastapayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatu Tamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. By regular attendance in the classes of Bhagavatam, by rendering service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service under the personality of God, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an yearbook of fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We continue Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Founderacharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna and welcome again. Let us share some feedback from the devotees from last week's session, verses 18 to 31. Please type in the chat whatever you could remember that came to your memory, or what you consciously decided to actually remember from Srila Prabhupada's purports and discussion. Hemavati Radhika says, Krishna loves and appreciates that which comes from the heart. We should go to the extent to engage our hearts. Krishna consciousness is an affair, a loving affair with Krishna. And an affair is not so much related to the brain, the intelligence, or even to some extent physically with the hands or any of the senses. But its basis, its foundation, its root is based on the heart. When the heart is engaged, when the heart is in love with Krishna, then all the other senses follow. You will see people do what is dear to them. People engage and relate with things that are dear to them. Dear means emotionally dear, from one's heart. So that connection that we need to cultivate with Krishna has to come from deep, from really ourselves, the soul. And the soul is in the region of the heart. So therefore, emotion, love, these come from the heart. And naturally, that is what Krishna is looking for. This is bhakti, this is devotion. This is what Krishna is looking for. Prabhupada also makes this point that Krishna consciousness is not some intellectual adjustment or word jugglery. Oh, I love God. I love Krishna. Prabhupada gives the example, the husband comes home and after a hard day's work, comes in the evening, and then he sees no supper on the table. So he says, where's supper? And she said, no, I love you lots. I love you so much, darling, I love you. Yes, but where's the supper? No, I love you lots. So that's really not love. Why? Because it is not heart deep. It is not coming from the heart. So Krishna is looking, what is in your heart? I may say, yes, Krishna, I want to serve you, I love you, but is it coming from the heart? Sometimes we may be able to even act externally, showing that we are loving Krishna, but internally there could be inauspicious sentiments. We see that so often in the Mahabharata. There are those who don't appreciate or love Krishna. Apparently, they can come in front of others like they're loving Krishna. In fact, they can come in front of Krishna like they are his well-wishers. But actually, Krishna reads right through them. Krishna sees right through them. Then Mother Sharina says, Hare Krishna, please accept Mahabali's appreciation. We must come to the point that everything belongs to Krishna and everything must be offered to him for his pleasure. Yes, a very, very, this point is difficult because of our conditioning. So it's very, very difficult. But at least intellectually, if we understand that, so that's a start. That's a very, very good start. That is why Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports, just getting exposed to that. I mean, just consider, Prabhupada said, you touch my books, you can make advancement. So just by getting his books, you're making advancement. Now you're opening his books and you're getting that knowledge that is so profound and revealing. That is powerful. When we start applying what we are hearing, that becomes even more powerful and purifying. So it's gradual, but at least the foundation, we want to build a very solid foundation. Why? Because this is not a one-time effort. It's not like this life is all in all and when we die, that's it. No, we are building for the future. So whatever we are taking, consuming from a Krishna conscious perspective now, in the present moment, is building for our future. Therefore, we want to build a solid foundation. Just like when you build a house, you are building a solid foundation. You cannot see the foundation. And if somebody says, well, why should we even bother about the foundation? Nobody can even see it. Let's just ignore it. Let's just leave it. That will not be very good for the house. So we should see every activity that we are engaging in devotional service every single day. We are laying that foundation for a more and more auspicious, more and more devotional filled life with Krishna, Krishna's associates, service to Krishna. So even this point that Mother Sharina has shared should be the foundation. Every time we are engaging in this world, we should reflect, yes, it's Krishna's. Every time we have an inauspicious thought to enjoy and exploit this world in whatever way, whether it's a ounce of enjoyment or a mountain of enjoyment separate from Krishna, we should remind ourselves after that enjoyment or during that enjoyment, we should remind ourselves, this is not good. This is Krishna's property. Krishna should be the enjoyer. In this way, we should keep reminding ourselves through our defects, through our shortcomings, and through our proper engagement in devotional service, that everything should be offered to the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Nalini Kanta says, there is a higher perspective to what we perceive. Yes. There's always a higher perspective. And when we're engaging in this world with devotees in Krishna consciousness, we should not be quick to judge. We should not be quick to take sides. Why? Because we don't know everything. because we don't know. We don't have 360-degree vision. Only Krishna does. And we may not know every single part of the puzzle that we are seeing. And because we don't know every part of the puzzle that we are seeing, we cannot make a proper decision in terms of what's right, what's wrong. So therefore, it is key that we go more introspective to become more Krishna conscious, so that Krishna can direct us, Krishna can inspire us in terms of dealing with circumstances, dealing with situations, dealing with others. So that is very, very important, because there can always be a higher perspective that Krishna is seeing. And if we just see what if we just act on what we see, we may be cracking our foundation of Krishna consciousness. We may be digging a hole on our foundation of Krishna consciousness. And as we mentioned, it's not a question of right or wrong. It's really a question of what does Krishna want? And for that, it really means to become Krishna conscious. And on the ultimate sense, in the ultimate sense, what happens in this world is really irrelevant. What happens in this world is really irrelevant. What happens in your world in relation to Krishna, that is relevant. Consider, there may be a war. Now, when we see a war, we're just looking at the war, but there may be a higher perspective to that war. There may be a fight, there may be fights between them demons and the demigods, and that is why there's that, the ramification of that is now filtering on this planet as a war. And we cannot avoid it, we cannot stop it, but what we can do, what is important for us in relation to that, is our situation in relation to Krishna. If we are impacted, if we are involved to some extent or disturbed some extent with that, it's our relation with Krishna. How can I maintain and keep my cool, so to speak, so that I can, with a cool head, think of Krishna? Or I can get so engrossed in the external war that I lose focus of my Krishna consciousness. So therefore, we should always keep the focus, always keep in mind what is the goal. Thank you very much for everyone's feedback. Let us proceed with today's verses. So I'm only using one camera, one screen, because I'm load shedded. So I may not be able to share my camera or even see. All right, let us continue. So we're going to be covering 32 to 44. Yudhishthir retires. And there's 3 sections, 34 to 37, the first section that we'll cover. Krishna's disappearance and Kali's entrance. Yudhishthir prepares to leave. Then Yudhishthir enthrones Parikshit and Vajra, and Yudhishthir retires, not depending on brothers, travels to the north. Text 32. Nishamya Bhagavan Margam Samstam Yadukulasya Swapataya Matim Chakre Nibrithatma Yudhishthira. Upon hearing of Lord Krishna's returning to his abode, and upon understanding the end of the Yadu dynasty's earthly manifestation, Yudhishthira decided to go back home, back to Godhead. We heard last week our Arjuna understanding Krishna has left, feeling that separation, he started to contemplate on Krishna's instructions on Bhagavad Gita. And he could personally experience Krishna's presence. And upon hearing this from Arjuna, now Yudhishthir Maharaj, understanding the situation, he is now making a decision that now it's time for me also to go. Understand that he is the emperor of the whole planet. So he's the king, he's the emperor, he's the ruler. And as a ruler, he is now going to set a very, very powerful example. And Prabhupada is going to elaborate on the purports, in his purports, on this point as an exemplary leader, a ruler. What should he do? Prabhupada in his purport says, Yudhishthir also turned his attention to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita after hearing about the Lord's departure from the vision of earthly people. He began to deliberate on the Lord's way of appearance and departure. The mission of the Lord's appearance and disappearance in this mortal universe is completely dependent on his supreme will. So here we find Yudhishthira Maharaj is in a situation where, as a pure devotee of the Lord, he is in love with Krishna and the Yadavas. And they have now left this world. Krishna has left this world, which means his loved ones have left this world. When we experience our loved ones leaving this world, what should we do to get solace? Because that love is there. And when our loved ones leave, we're going to feel that pain. So what should we do? We should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Yudhishthira. And what did Maharaj Yudhishthira do? He turned his attention to Bhagavad Gita. And specifically, he's turned his attention in Bhagavad Gita to the aspects or to the sections where the Lord discusses his appearance and disappearance. And he deliberated on those instructions. Very, very important word, deliberate. He contemplated, he thought of these words of Lord Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. So when our loved ones leave, we can turn, for example, to second chapter and contemplate on what Krishna is talking about in relation to the soul. This knowledge of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita gives solace to the heart. Truth gives solace. So that's what we can do and learn from Maharaj Yudhishthira's example. The mission of the Lord's appearance and disappearance in the mortal world is completely dependent on his supreme will. He is not forced to appear or disappear by any superior energy, as the living beings appear and disappear in force by the laws of nature. So this also we have to appreciate and understand. We are forced. Our appearance and disappearance is forced. But Krishna, he appears out of his sweet, supreme, free will. Which means that Krishna doesn't need to appear. He's not answerable to anyone. Oh, why didn't you appear? No. Krishna is appearing out of his sweet, supreme, free will. He's appearing out of his compassionate nature. So whenever the Lord appears, sometimes people will say, why there's so much war and violence, so people are suffering. Doesn't God care? Doesn't, if God is all merciful, then how can this happen? So Krishna does appear in this world showing his mercy. And Krishna appears in different features showing his mercy. Whenever the Lord likes, he can appear himself from anywhere and everywhere without disturbing his appearance and disappearance in any other place. This is a very, very profound statement by Srila Prabhupada. Whenever the Lord likes, he can appear himself from anywhere, like Lord Nrsimhadev appearing from a pillar, or like Varadev appearing from the nostrils of Lord Brahma, and everywhere. There is no circumstance or situation that can hinder the Lord's appearance. Which means that if we really want to see the Lord, if we really attract the Lord by our devotion, then the Lord can appear. There is absolutely no situation or circumstance that can prevent the Lord from appearing, which would imply that if the Lord is not appearing due to me desiring and wanting the Lord to appear, it could mean two things. One, we're not ready. And two, the Lord is waiting. Or the Lord has a certain plan. And therefore, we should honor the fact that the Lord has supreme free will, and I cannot force him to appear. And therefore, I would always take it that I need to keep improving. I need to keep crying, begging for the Lord's service. And when he likes, when he's happy, when he's satisfied, then no doubt he will appear because he can. He is like the sun, Prabhupada continues. The sun appears and disappears on its own accord at any place without disturbing its presence in other places. The sun appears in the morning in India without disappearing from the Western Hemisphere. The sun is present everywhere and anywhere all over the solar system. But it also appears that in a particular place, the sun appears in the morning and also disappears at some fixed time in the evening. The time limitation, even of the sun, is of no concern. So what to speak of the Supreme Lord, who is the creator and the controller of the sun? Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that anyone who factually understands the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord by his inconceivable energies become liberated from the laws of birth and death and is placed in the eternal spiritual sky where the Vaikuntha planets are. There, such liberated persons can eternally live without the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease. In the spiritual sky, the Lord and those who are eternally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord are all eternally young, because there is no old age and disease, and there is no death. Because there is no death, there is no birth. It is concluded, therefore, that simply by understanding the Lord's appearance and disappearance in truth, one can attain the perfectional stage of eternal life. Therefore, Yudhishthira also began to consider going back to Godhead. The Lord appears on this earth or any other mortal planet, along with his associates who live with him eternally, and the members of the Yadu family who engage in supplementing the pastimes of the Lord are no other than his eternal associates. And so also Yudhishthira and his brothers and mothers, ex-mother, etc. Since the appearance and disappearance of the Lord and his eternal associates are transcendental, one should not be bewildered by the external features of appearance and disappearance. That last sentence is also very, very important. Since the appearance and disappearance of the Lord and his eternal associates are transcendental, one should not be bewildered by the external feature of appearance and disappearance. So many people, and we're going to go through, we see in the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas left, their leaving was not a very wonderful, glorious way of leaving. It's like they journeying to the Himalayas and leaving their bodies. So leaving this world, the external features of firstly appearance, but specifically disappearance, how the Lord and his eternal associates leave this world, Prabhupada is making the point. We should not be bewildered by that. Again, this can be connected back to the point of perspective. They are higher dimensions, higher perspective to what is there. So we may see devotees leave in car accidents due to COVID, due to other circumstances, a murder, some violence. So we may be seeing that perspective, but that perspective is an external feature. And Prabhupada is encouraging us, one should not be bewildered. So to ask the question, oh, why did a devotee die like this? That means you didn't read this purport. Because in this purport, Prabhupada is making very clear, do not see that perspective. Do not see, don't get bewildered by that external feature. What you're seeing is the external feature, and the Lord can use unlimited external features. So for example, in the Mahabharata, Krishna is using the external feature that his own family members, his own eternal associates are drinking intoxication and fighting with each other and killing each other. Externally, somebody may see, just see how degraded can the Yadavas fall. I mean, this is ridiculous. These are Krishna's eternal associate, Krishna's family. But that is external feature. And we should not be bewildered by that. Krishna uses different circumstances, situation for different people, for different lessons. We should see beyond that. And seeing beyond that, Prabhupada is sharing a few sentences above at the end. The Lord appears on the earth or any other mortal planet along with his associates who live with him eternally, and the members of the Yadu family who are engaged in supplementing the pastimes of the Lord are no other than his eternal associates. And so also Maharaj Yudhishthira and his brothers and mother, which means the Pandavas are eternally with Krishna. Krishna has now returned back to the spiritual world. So where are they going to go? They're going to follow Krishna. And in order to follow him, they need to unmanifest and wind up on this plane. So how they wind up is immaterial. The fact that they're winding up and they're going with Krishna. So if you really see, they were with Krishna on this planet, and now they're going to go with Krishna in the spiritual world or wherever else Krishna goes. 33. Pritapyanushrutya dhananjayo titam nasam yadunam bhagavad gatim chatam ekanta bhaktya bhagavatyo dakshaje niveshitat mo parama pararama samshrite. Kunti, after overhearing Arjuna's telling of the end of the Yadu dynasty and disappearance of Lord Krishna, engaged in the devotional service of the transcendental personality of Godhead with full attention, and thus gained release from the cause of material existence. So very exemplary. As family members, they didn't see, okay, Krishna's gone, let us continue. Queen Kunti didn't say, okay, Yudhishthira is going, let me carry on. No. The foundation of the existence is Krishna. And we see how each individual personality of the Pandavas are making their own decision. Yudhishthira Maharaj, after hearing Arjuna, made his decision. Yes, I need to also leave this world. Time up. Queen Kunti, hearing Arjuna's words, also decided, yes, I need to fully absorb and engage in devotional service and leave this world. Why? Because we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna. So our relative relationships in this world is not all in all. What's more and what should be more important is our relationship with Krishna. And at any cost, that relationship with Krishna and his eternal associate in the spiritual world, that should be the foundation or the basis of our decision making. Not so much the relative situation in this world. And we see the Pandavas at obviously an appropriate time in terms of their services have been rendered. And now because the services have been rendered, now they also need to make the decision to leave this world in a Krishna conscious way. Robert says, the setting of the sun does not mean the end of the sun. It means that the sun is out of sight, of our sight. Similarly, the end of the mission of the Lord on a particular planet or universe only means that he is out of sight, of our sight. The end of the Yadu dynasty also does not mean that it is annihilated. It disappears along with the Lord out of our sight. As Yudhishthira decided to prepare to go back to Godhead, so also Kunti decided. And thus she fully engaged herself in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, which guarantees one a passport for going back to Godhead after quitting this present material body. So now we know our destination. Our destination is wherever Krishna is, that is our destination. Wherever the Lord is engaging in his eternal pastimes, that's our destination. Krishna is eternally in the spiritual world, that is our destination, so that we can continue to render service to him. And we need a passport. So the passport is devotional service. And when we get this passport of transcendental devotional service of the Lord, then it guarantees one a passport to go back to God. So therefore, engaging in devotional service is very, very important. Without engaging in devotional service, it is impossible to go back to Godhead. Because what are you going to do when you're there? Are you going to tell Krishna, Krishna, I'm missing my iPhone or my Android, my cell phone. Krishna, can you please arrange and organize? I'm missing Facebook. I'm missing WhatsApp. No, these things don't exist in the spiritual world. So we want to become attached to transcendental devotional service. If we have the facility of technology, we can engage that in Krishna's service, but we don't want to become attached to the technology minus devotional service. We want to engage in devotional service purely to please Krishna, because that becomes our passport to go back home. And especially at the time of death. The beginning of devotional service to the Lord is the beginning of spiritualizing the present body. And thus, an unalloyed devotee of the Lord loses all material contact in the present body. The abode of the Lord is not a myth, as is taught by the unbelievers or ignorant people, but one cannot reach there by any material means like a Sputnik or space capsule. But one can certainly reach there after leaving this present body, and one must prepare himself to go back to Godhead by practicing devotional service. That guarantees a passport for going back to Godhead, and Kunti adopted it. So Prabhupada is also giving his blessings And that those blessings that Prabhupada is giving in this purport is firstly, the abode of the Lord is not a myth. Spiritual life is not a myth. The Supreme Lord is not a myth. Devotional service is not a myth. Goloka Vrindavan, Navadvip, is not a myth. So that we need to be completely 100%, 200%, 1,000% completely convinced that yes, Krishna is there. These are eternal, genuine, supreme personalities, Krishna and his associates. Once you are convinced of that, now your goal, your direction in terms of I need to eternally connect with them. And the process of connecting is devotional service. So we are engaging in devotional service so that we can transform what we have in terms of body, mind, senses, material intelligence, all these aspects, we can spiritualize them. Spiritualize this material body. And in doing that, through chanting the holy names of Krishna, revive our identity. And in this way, prepare to go back to Godhead. So our life is really a preparation of going back home. We have deviated, we have taken a detour. And not just one detour, we've taken many detours. Life after life, after life, after life, we've taken a detour. We are moving in the wrong direction. The pure devotees come to this world from the spiritual world, and as traffic coordinators, they stop, they show us our hand, they show their hand, stop, you're moving in the wrong direction. You're supposed to go that direction. They're giving us a direction. So we need to heed the direction that they're telling us to move in. We see Srila Prabhupada on the Back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada is there on the top header. He's in a circle and he's pointing. That pointing, that mudra, it's a preaching mudra with a finger up, one finger up. You find generally parents use that, right, on children, pointing. Stop your nonsense. So Prabhupada's pointing. Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Stop your nonsense. Surrender to Krishna. Go back to Godhead. Go back home. So we need to become convinced that I have taken a detour for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and I'm yet still not satisfied. The same chaos, the same mess, the same stress, birth, death, disease, and old age. There is no sight of bliss and happiness. Why? Because if you lose your path, and then no matter whether you turn left or right, to whatever degrees you want to go, you are still lost. You need to turn back and retract your steps. So in this way, in this material world, no matter where you go, how you move, what direction, what situation, you are basically still moving on the wrong road, wrong path. You're still lost. So Prabhupada is guiding us back home, back to Godhead. And he's giving a guarantee that in this life, if we sincerely, seriously practice Krishna consciousness, then it's guaranteed that through the process of devotional service, we can go back home, back to God. And there are many examples. And one such example is Queen Kunti. 34. Yaya harad puvo baram tam tanum Vijaha Vijahavaja Kantakam Kanta Keneva Dvayam Kapisuti Samam. The Supreme Unborn, Lord Shri Krishna, caused the members of the Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies, and thus he relieved the burden of the world. This action was like picking out a thorn with a thorn, though both are the same to the controller. So now we are hearing about how Lord Krishna is arranging for the Yadu dynasty to leave. Purport. And it's interesting in terms of how they left. And Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, which Prabhupada is quoting, is giving us a glimpse, you could say a higher perspective, a different perspective. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur suggests that rishis like Shaunaka and others who were hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Sutta Goswami at Namisharanya were not happy to hear about the Yadus dying in the madness of intoxication. To give them relief from this mental agony, Sutta Goswami assured them that the Lord caused the members of the Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies, by which they had to take away the burden of the world. The Lord and his eternal associates appear on earth to help the administrative demigods in eradicating the burden of the world. He therefore called for some of the confidential demigods to appear in the Yadu family and to serve him in his great mission. After the mission was fulfilled, the demigods, by the will of the Lord, relinquished their corporal bodies by fighting amongst themselves in madness of intoxication. The demigods are accustomed to drinking the Soma Pras beverage, and therefore the drinking of wine and intoxication are not unknown to them. Sometimes they are put into trouble for indulging in intoxication. Once the sons of Kuvera fell in the wrath of Narada for being intoxicated, but afterwards they regained their original forms by the grace of Lord Shri Krishna. We shall find this story in the 10th canto. For the Supreme Lord, both the Asuras and the demigods are equal, but the demigods are obedient to the Lord, whereas the Asuras are not. Therefore, the example of picking out a thorn by another thorn is quite befitting. One thorn, which causes pinprick on the leg of the Lord, is certainly disturbing to the Lord. And the other thorn, which takes out the disturbing element, certainly gives service to the Lord. So although every living being is part and parcel of the Lord, still one who is a pinprick to the Lord is called an Asura, and one who is a voluntary servitor of the Lord is called a Devata or demigod. In the material world, the Devatas and the Asuras are always contending, and the Devatas are always saved from the hands of the Asuras by the Lord. Both of them are under the control of the Lord. The Lord is full of two kinds of living beings. The world is full of two kinds of living beings. And the Lord's mission is always to protect the Devatas and destroy the Asuras whenever there is such a need in the world, and to do good to both of them. So both the demons and the demigods, they are part of Krishna's family. And the Asuras, Prabhupada writes very wonderfully, that one who is a pinprick to the Lord is called an Asura. So we don't want to be a pinprick to the Lord. We don't want to have our consciousness pricking the Supreme Lord. We don't want to have our activities pricking the Supreme Lord. So it's a very wonderful meditation. Whenever we're doing something that is demonic in tendency, in mentality, in activity. We should see that I am actually pricking the Supreme Lord. And if I'm pricking the Lord, I'm going to feel that pain. I'm going to get a reaction of that pain. I want to soothe. I want to bathe the lotus feet of Krishna, not prick his lotus feet. Therefore, I want to be a demigod. I want to be a devata. I want to be serving the mission of the Lord, not disturbing the mission. And we see again externally, the Yadavas are influenced by intoxicating and fighting. But on another hand, on a higher perspective, Krishna is sending the demigods back to their position, and he's sending the Yadavas back to the spiritual world. So the Yadavas and the demigods are not dying. It's just that Krishna is using this amazing scenario, scene of them fighting. And there may be different reasons. So for example, it is described that no one on the planet could destroy the Yadavas. They were Krishna's own family. They were very powerful. And Krishna could also not leave them behind because of their power. There would be a disturbance on the planet. So he had to make arrangements for them to come. But the Yadavas, they love Krishna and they love each other. So they would never fight with each other. So Krishna makes an arrangements, no problem. Under intoxication, you will forget each other. Then you will fight each other. So Krishna makes arrangements, they fight with each other, and in this way, they ascend back to the spiritual world. So Krishna simply used intoxication as a medium to take them from this plane, material world, where they performed service for the mission of the Lord, back to the spiritual world through killing each other. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is making a point that shown Sutta Goswami, understanding the hearts of those that are hearing the Bhagavatam, and to reduce the pain, he encouraged them, saying, this is all under the control of Krishna, which is true. Every part of the Mahabharata was directed by Krishna. Krishna is the script writer, he's the director. So nothing in the Mahabharata was out of Krishna's control. Even when it apparently seems like Krishna is out of control, he's not. He is directing that script, all the devotees, all the associates, all the demons, all the demigods, according to his desire, according to the wishes of his devotees, according to the curses of his devotees, in order to honor the different curses, etc. Krishna has written the script and everyone is following perfectly. There is never, ever a time when Krishna loses control. Which means that when we see a scene that is not favorable to our consciousness, then we should fall back on the fact that Krishna is in control. Krishna never loses control. And I may not like this scene, but that does not mean that Krishna is not in control. This is how Krishna wants it. And because this is how Krishna wants it, and Krishna is making this arrangement, because Krishna's hand is there, that's auspicious, that's wonderful, that's glorious. Let's see how fascinating, how thoughtful, how adventurous, how far thinking Krishna is. So we have to see Krishna's hand. Prabhupada makes the point that when you start chanting Hare Krishna, when you start engaging in devotional service, start chanting Hare Krishna, then your karma is now taken by Krishna. He puts it, this is my addition, he puts it in the closet, he keeps it there, and then he administers your karma through his hands. So now Krishna doesn't destroy your karma. He doesn't nullify your karma. He keeps it in the closet. And then he administers it at the appropriate time, place, and circumstance. But it comes through his hand. So the materialists, they also have the karma. The aspiring devotee also has his karma. But the materialists, they are handed their karma through the agency of Maya. The aspiring devotees, they are handed their karma through the agency of Krishna's own personal hands. Krishna is personally giving you back your karma. Now, when Krishna personally takes your karma, because you're chanting Hare Krishna, and let's say he takes part and he puts it in his closet, and then he takes a part of that karma, and now he's going to deliver that part of that karma to you through his personal own transcendental hands. He can either destroy that karma completely, so it gives you nothing. He can inflate that karma if he thinks it's going to be better for you, or he can reduce the karma if he thinks this is good for you. Either way, it's coming through Krishna's hands. That makes it very special. When the sages of Namisharanya hear the point that, oh yes, this ghastly war between the Yadus, this is actually arranged by Krishna. Oh, how wonderful. It's arranged by Krishna. It's Krishna's desire. So when you get your own karma, it may not be wonderful. It may be ghastly. It may be painful. It may be wonderful. It is coming from Krishna's hands. We need to see it like that, and we need to accept it and digest it like that. And yes, we may not appreciate it like that. We may complain and say, Krishna, why are you doing this? But at least if we know that Krishna's hand is there, Krishna is giving you, we can say Krishna, we can tell Krishna, Krishna, this is very disturbing to my consciousness. You know, I don't like it, but I know you're giving it. It's coming through your hands. That is giving me solace. That is wonderful. Thank you, Krishna. It's got the touch of your hands, the fact that it touched, the fact that the karma which you are meant to get through the agency of Maya is coming through the agency of Krishna's personal hand, means that karma technically has been spiritualized. So it's no more karma. Prabhupada says it is Krishna karma. It is spiritualized. It's just that we are not seeing it like that. It is there for our Krishna consciousness. It's there for helping us. So we can tell Krishna, Krishna, I'm so thick-headed. You know, I have a donkey brain. Please forgive me. I'm blaming you. I'm seeing this as an unfortunate situation. But I know that it is Krishna karma. I know that it's coming through your hands. Therefore, give me the strength, the ability, the intellect to see it like that and appreciate it like this. And in this way, continue to serve you with greater and greater vigor. Text 35. Yatha matsyadi rupani date jayat yatha nata bhubara shapito yena joho tacha kalevaram. The Supreme Lord relinquished the body which he manifested to diminish the burden of the earth. Just like a magician, he relinquishes one body to accept different ones, like the fish incarnation and others. So this verse and 34 and 35, we're hearing about Yudhishthir Maharaj and Queen Kunti and how they're leaving And these two verses, they come, it's like there's a break in the trend or the specific theme. And some commentators say that these two verses are really not proper in terms of where they are. But our acharyas in Srila Prabhupada, Jiva Goswami, they say, no, it's perfectly in line. In some sampradayas, they don't accept this specific verse, because in this verse, it says the Supreme Lord relinquished the body. So some will take it, oh, just see, God died. He left the body. That means he didn't have a transcendental body. Because we know from Brahma Samhita, Krishna doesn't have a body. He is his body. He is completely Satchidanand Vigraha. He doesn't have a material body. He doesn't live behind a material body. Because he doesn't have a material body. But here it says relinquished. That means giving up. So how can he give up something that he doesn't have? So this verse doesn't make sense. It's not proper, not bona fide. But our acharyas, they, in using the words Kalevaram, Rupani, they share light in terms of the proper perspective to see this verse. So Prabhupada in the purport says, the Supreme Lord, personality of Godhead, is neither impersonal nor formless, but his body is non-different from him. And therefore he is known as the embodiment of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So Krishna does not have two bodies. It's not like he has a material body and a spiritual body. Like how we are spiritual, so we have a spiritual form and we have a material body. We've got two forms. Krishna doesn't have two forms. Krishna has one form. The embodied, even the spiritual being has one spiritual form in the spiritual world. It's not like you have you are a spirit soul in the spiritual world and you have a body. No, the spirit soul is the body. There's no two entities like in the material world. In the material world, there's duality. In the spiritual world, there's no duality. So there's non-difference in terms of the person and the body. Krishna is non-different from his body. In the Brihad Vaishnav Tantra, it is clearly mentioned that anyone who considers the form of Lord Krishna to be made of material energy must be ostracized by all means. And if by chance the face of such an infidel is seen, one must clean himself by jumping the river with his clothing. The Lord is described as Amrita, or deathless, because he has no material body. Under the circumstances, the Lord's dying or quitting his body is like the jugglery of a magician. So now, in relation to our previous point of a higher perspective, so Prabhupada is giving another example that we can enforce this aspect of perspective. Here Krishna is acting like a magician. A magician shows by his tricks that he is cut to pieces, burned to ashes, and made unconscious by hypnotic influences, but all these are false shows only. Factually, the magician himself is neither burned to ashes nor cut to pieces, nor is he dead or unconscious at any stage of his magical demonstration. Similarly, the Lord has his eternal forms of unlimited variety, of which the fish incarnation, as was exhibited within this universe, is also one. Because there are innumerable universes, some way or other, a fish incarnation must be manifesting his pastime without cessation. In this verse, the particular word date, eternally accepted, and not the word ditva, accepted for the occasion, is used. The idea is that the Lord does not create the fish incarnation. He eternally has such a form and the appearance and disappearance of such an incarnation serves particular purposes. In the Bhagavad Gita 7:24-25, the Lord says, the impersonalists think that I have no form, that I am formless, but that at present I have accepted a form to serve a purpose, and now I am manifested. But such speculators are factually without sharp intelligence. Through sharp intelligence, though they may be good scholars in the Vedic literatures, they are practically ignorant of my inconceivable energies and my eternal forms of personality. The reason is that I reserve the power of not being exposed to the non-devotees by my mystic curtain. The less intelligent fools are therefore unaware of my eternal form, which is never to be vanquished and is unborn. In the Padma Purana, it is said that those who are envious and always angry at the Lord are unfit to know the factual and eternal form of the Lord. In the Padma Purana, it is said that those who are envious and always angry at the Lord are unfit to know the actual form, the actual internal form of the Lord. So we never want to be envious of Krishna. Oh, why is Krishna enjoying? Oh, why must I serve Krishna? Oh, why must Krishna? No, we should never be envious of Krishna. Why? Because it is, why must Krishna get enjoyment? Why must Krishna, be served? Because he is Krishna. He is the Supreme Personality of God, and not you. You are a part and parcel, and the part is meant to serve the whole. So therefore, the part should never be envious of the whole. Prabhupada gives the example of the body, different bodily parts. They're taking their placards and they're totoing. They're going on the street and saying with the placards, we don't want to serve the mouth, we don't want to serve the stomach. We have to do all the hard work. We have to go and get the fruit and vegetables, prepare the vegetables, cut the vegetables, cook the vegetables, and then we have to take and feed the mouth and the stomach. The stomach is enjoying. It's unfair. We're not going to feed. Eventually, they become weak. So their welfare is in serving the stomach. Our welfare is in serving Krishna. So we should never be envious and never be angry. Oh, Krishna, why did you do this to me? We should never be angry. Again, we should understand and realize that whatever Krishna does is always for the benefit of every living entity. He is doing everything as a loving father with love and compassion. So nothing Krishna does is out of lust, anger, greed, jealousy, envy, madness, illusion to cause pain. No, Krishna's administering love and love only. Why? Because he is an embodiment of love. Therefore, if we are receiving that love in the form of a bitter pill, we should see it as beneficial for us. Just like sometimes the Ayurvedic doctor has to prescribe neem, karela, some bitter vegetables, which is very beneficial for the patient. It's not because the Ayurvedic doctor hates the patient. No, he wants to cure the patient. But because of the specific disease, bitter neem and bitter karela is what's required. So Krishna administers like that. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord appears like a thunderbolt to those who are restless. Shishupal, at the time of being killed by the Lord, could not see him as Krishna, being dazzled by the glare of Brahmajyoti. Therefore, the temporary manifestation of the Lord as a thunderbolt to the restless appointed by Kamsa, or the glaring appearance of the Lord before Shishupal, was relinquished by the Lord, but the Lord as a magician is eternally existent and is never vanquished in any circumstance. So now you see here Prabhupada is using that word of relinquish, which from our perspective is generally like giving up a body. And Prabhupada is putting it into a context in relation to the Acharya's understanding as well. Jiva Goswami says here, relinquish means like a mentality for those that are seeing. So Shishupal because of his mentality, Krishna shows him Brahmajyoti, that perspective. The wrestlers, because of their mentality, Krishna changes his mentality and shows them the thunderbolt, death. Krishna is still the same person, but he presents a specific mentality, a specific perspective of how they are seeing him. And those different perspectives is what Krishna is relinquishing eventually in maintaining his same eternal spiritual form. So he's not really giving up bodies. Such forms are temporarily shown to asuras only. And when such exhibitions are withdrawn, the asuras think that the Lord is no more existent, such as the foolish audience think the magician is burnt to ashes or cut to pieces. The conclusion is that Lord has no material body, and therefore he is never to be killed or changed by his transcendental body. So when the Lord relinquishes his different perspectives, remember his different aspects and perspective to how he's responding to the wrestlers, the demons, Shishupal, etc. Krishna's perspective is also real. And Krishna thinks of a form, then that form is also real, because Krishna's thinking is eternal. Krishna's thoughts, Krishna's name is Satya Sankalpa, whatever he thinks manifest. So there's no illusion in Krishna's perspective. So the wrestlers are actually seeing Thunderbolt. Shishupal is actually seeing Brahmajyoti. Mother Yashoda is actually seeing Krishna, my Lala. The coward boys are seeing Krishna as friend. The gopis are seeing Krishna as lover. They sing that. But yet Krishna is one person, eternal. He doesn't change form. Now we know when Krishna left this world, he did leave behind a form. And that's a different point in discussion of what happens to that form. But Prabhupada writes, we read also in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes that that form was there for the atheists, to convince the atheists. And that form is also used to be placed in Lord Jagannath's form, in his Dhatu form. So Krishna performs different pastimes like that. He convinces the devotees, he convinces the demons, but we should be fully convinced that Krishna does not have a material body. He never had, he will never have, he always has a spiritual transcendental body. 36. Yada mukundo bhagavan imam mahim jaho swat tanva shravaniya satkatam tadahar eva prati buddha chetasam abhadra hetur kalir anvavartata. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, and from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. So Krishna leaving this world is really the beginning of Kali Yuga. And where does Kali reside? Abhadra Hetu. Firstly, what is the symptom of Kali Yuga? What is the influence of Kali Yuga? Kali Yuga creates inauspicious conditions. And where does Kali reside? To those who are endowed with poor fund of knowledge. Prabhupada uses the word endowed. It's like, and endowed is something you give, like a gift. So they are gifted with poor fund of knowledge. And these souls who are endowed with poor fund of knowledge, that's where Kali reside, and thus influencing them to create more and more inauspicious conditions. Purport. The influence of Kali can be enforced only upon those who are not fully developed in God consciousness. So Kali cannot influence a pure devotee. One can neutralize. So we may say, well, I'm not a pure devotee. Okay, you're not a pure devotee, no problem. Can you neutralize Kali's influence? Yes, Prabhupada is telling us how. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under supreme care of the personality of Godhead. One can neutralize the effects of Kali by keeping oneself fully under the supreme care of the personality of Godhead. So we can definitely neutralize the influence of Kali Yuga. And the onus is on ourselves. By keeping oneself, we have to ourselves keep ourselves fully under the supreme care. So we need to take shelter of Krishna. When we take shelter of Krishna, take the Krishna is providing, and we are under that care of Krishna, then we can be protected from the influence of Kali. So it's interesting in terms of the word, Prabhupada says supreme care. This care that Krishna can provide can be provided in the association of devotees as well. When the devotees come together collectively as a community, and in that community, the focus of every single member of that community is one and only to take full shelter of Krishna, to be under Krishna's supreme care. So collectively, everyone's aspiration and intention, desire is to be under Krishna's supreme care. Then collectively, that community acts as a neutralizing effect for Kali, which means that if anyone comes in that community, they will experience a spiritual environment. So this is how we can create a community of those who are taking full shelter of Krishna under his care, thereby collectively caring for each other. And if any soul enters that caring environment, they will also be protected. And caring for devotees, caring for the souls that come in this community, means firstly having the caring mentality, and then having the caring attitude, and then having the caring actions. So all three need to be there. Our intention, our attitude, our desire, and then our actions. All based and focused on the supreme care of the Supreme Personality of God. His Holiness Radha Swami gave the example that if somebody comes to the temple, or he made the point, Prabhupada said that it takes gallons of blood to make a devotee. So if we chase that devotee away, then it's like wasting that gallons of blood that was there to make that devotee. So caring for devotees is very, very important. The age of Kali ensued just after the Battle of Kurukshetra, but it could not exert its influence because of the presence of the Lord. The Lord, however, left this earthly planet in his own transcendental body. And as soon as he left, the symptoms of Kali Yuga as were envisioned by Maharaj Yudhishthira prior to Arjuna's arrival from Dwarka, began to manifest. And Maharaj Yudhishthira rightly conjectured on the departure of Lord from the earth, as we have already explained. And the Lord left our sight just as when the sun sets, it is out of our sight. So we want to always keep Krishna present in our association. And we can do that as we saw the example of Arjuna through his instructions. We want to keep Prabhupada in the center, always in the present, always in our presence, through his instructions. By keeping the mission of the Lord and his pure devotee as our life and soul, then we also always present and associating with his personalities. And we can never be separated, and we can never be influenced by Kali Yuga. That is the protection, that is the shield. As soon as Krishna is not there, as soon as the instructions of Prabhupada and Krishna are not there, that means, as Prabhupada says, poor fund of knowledge. It is only due to poor fund of knowledge that you take Krishna out. You don't follow Krishna's instructions. And when that poor fund of knowledge allows you to act in such an inauspicious way, Kali becomes very excited and jumps into your consciousness and starts to influence you in creating inauspiciousness. So inauspiciousness simply means minus Krishna. Auspiciousness simply means plus Krishna. 37. Yudhishthirastat parisharpanam pada pure cha rastecha griha tatat mani vibhavya loban ritaji jinha jiha himsanadya adharma chakram gamanaya paryadat. Maharaj Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital state and home and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly. So the influence of Kali, avarice, falsehood, cheating, violence, where? In the capital, in the state, in the home, and even among individuals. This is the nature of Kali Yuga. So if we are experiencing any of these in this world, don't be surprised. This is Kali's period. We are in the last age. We're in Kali Yuga. And it's going to increase more and more and more. So our focus shouldn't be these qualities. Our focus should be following the footsteps of the Pandavas. The present age is influenced by the specific qualities of Kali. Since the days of the Battle of Kurukshetra, about 5,000 years ago, the influence of Kali began manifesting. And from authentic scriptures, it is learned that the age of Kali is still to run on for 427,000 years. So Kali Yuga goes on for 432,000 years, 5,000 years have passed. So we still have 427,000 years to go. So we're nowhere to the end of Kali Yuga. When you hear all these people coming, so the end of the world, end of the world. No, the end of the world is still far, far, far. The symptoms of Kali Yuga, as mentioned above, namely avarice, falsehood, diplomacy, cheating, nepotism, violence, and all such things are already in vague, and no one can imagine what is going to happen gradually with further increase of the influence of Kali till the day of annihilation. Yeah, you can't imagine. It's going to be horrific. We have already come to know that the influence of the age of Kali is meant for the godless so-called civilized men. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear from this horrible age. Those who are under the protection of the Lord have nothing to fear from this horrible age. Yudhishthir was a great devotee of the Lord, and there was no necessity of his being afraid of the age of Kali. But he preferred to retire from his active household life and prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. The Pandavas are eternal companions of the Lord, and therefore they are more interested in the company of the Lord than anything else. Besides that, being an ideal king, Yudhishthir wanted to retire just to set an example for others. As soon as there is some young fellow to look after the household affairs, one should at once retire from family life to uplift oneself to spiritual realization. One should not rot in the dark well of household life till one is dragged out by the will of Yamaraj. Modern politicians should take lessons from Yudhishthir about voluntary retirement from active life and should make room for the younger generation. Also, retired old gentlemen should take lessons from him and leave home for spiritual realization before being forcefully dragged away to meet death. So we need to make sure we have a succession plan. Let the youngsters and young generation continue, and let us focus on spiritual perfection. Okay, this is the culture, this is the Vedic culture. You don't want to hang on till death, till Yamaraj comes. No, we need to prepare. We need to understand time is ticking, and therefore I cannot waste my energy and my time. The priority should be focused on what is important. Kali Yuga is going to carry on. Issues will always be there. Avarice, falsehood, diplomacy, cheating, nepotism, violence, such things will always be there. This is Kali Yuga. Our focus should be on ourselves and our relationship with Krishna. And especially in terms of responsibility, like Yudhishthir, at an appropriate time, we have to hand over the baton. Now, when we hand over the baton to the younger generations, Yudhishthir, naturally, as an exemplary king, he was training his family members to also lead in an exemplary way, so that they can take up the service and continue. (38). So now Yudhishthir enthrones Parikshit and Vajra, Krishna's grandson. Swarat potram vina inam atmana shushamam gunai tayo nivyay patim bhumer abhyasin chad gajahave. Day after, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all lands bordered by the seas. Purport. The total land of the earth bordered by the seas was under the subjugation of the king of Hastinapur. Yudhishthir trained his grandson Parikshit, who was equally qualified in state administration in terms of the king's obligations to citizens. Thus, Parikshit was enthroned on the seat of Yudhishthir prior to his departure back to Godhead. Concerning Parikshit, the specific word used, vina jinam, is significant. Why was the king of Hastinapur, at least till the time of Parikshit, accepted as the emperor of the world? The only reason is that the people of the world were happy because of the good administration of the emperor. The happiness of citizens are due to the ample production of natural produce such as grains, fruits, milk, herbs, valuable stone, minerals, and everything that people needed. So here, Prabhupada is giving a practical solution for the administrators of this world on how to make their citizens happy. how we can also become happy. And the answer is the happiness of the citizens was due to ample production of natural produce. So we want to focus on natural produce. And what are those? Grains, fruits, milk, herbs, valuable stones, minerals, and everything that people needed. If we have ample of these things, everyone will be happy. They were even free from all bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, and disturbances caused by natural phenomena and other living beings. Because everyone was happy in all respects, there was no resentment. Although there was sometimes battles between state kings or for political reasons and supremacy, everyone was trained to attain the highest goal of life, and therefore the people who were enlightened enough, and therefore the people were also enlightened enough not to quarrel over trivialities. The influence of the age of Kali gradually infiltrated the good qualities of both the kings and citizens, and therefore a tense situation developed between the rulers and the ruled. But still, even in this age of disparity between the ruler and the ruled, they can be spiritual emolument and God consciousness. That is a special prerogative. So no matter how degraded Kali Yuga becomes, the opportunity is always there to revive God consciousness. That is the special prerogative in this age of Kali. And we see Prabhupada, taking Krishna consciousness to the Bauri. That was like Kali Yuga. And by the process of and the mercy of Sri Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada transformed those souls. So like that, individually, collectively, that opportunity is always there. 39. Matu Rayam Tata Vajram Sure Sena Patim Tata Prajapatyam Nirupyeshtim Agnin Apibad Ishwaram. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Surasena. Afterwards, Yudhishthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life. So here we see Yudhishthira enthroning Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, and it was Vajra who installed many deities of Krishna in Mathura and around Vrindavan that are even currently worshipped in today, at present, all due to the wonderful service of the grandson of Lord Krishna. Yudhishthira, after placing Maj Parikshit on the imperial throne of Hastinapur and after posting Vajra, great-grandson of Lord Krishna, as the king of Mathura, accepted the renounced order of life. The system of 4 orders of life and 4 castes in terms of the quality and work, known as Varnashram Dharma, is the beginning of real human life. And Yudhishthira, as the protector of the system of human activities, timely retired from active life as a sannyasi, handing over the charge of the administration to a trained prince, Maj Parikshit. Scientific system of Varnashram Dharma divides the human life into 4 divisions of occupation and 4 orders of life. The 4 orders of life as Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas is to be followed by all, irrespective of the occupational division. Modern politicians do not wish to retire from active life, even if they are old enough. But Yudhishthira Maj, as an ideal king, voluntarily retired from active administration of life to prepare himself for the next life. Therefore, life must be so arranged that at the last stage of life, say at least the last 15 to 20 years prior to death, can be absolutely devoted to devotional service of the Lord to attain the highest perfection of life. It is really foolishness to engage oneself all the days of one's life in material enjoyment and fruitive activities, because as long as the mind remains absorbed in fruitive work for material enjoyment, there is no chance of getting out from conditioned life or material bondage. No one should follow the societal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to God. Such a wonderful conclusion. No one should follow the societal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to God in the eternal service of Krishna. So our policy is not to accept the societal policy. And societal policy means neglecting one's supreme task. We have many things to do. We have many tasks, but do not neglect the most supreme of all tasks. And what is that? Attaining the highest perfection of life. We can attain many things in life, but do not forsake and neglect the supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life. And what is the highest perfection of life? Going back home, back to Godhead. Why? To watch TV? No. Why? To engage in eternal service of Krishna. So we are looking at the highest perfection of life, which is eternally serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Back home, back to God. Then the last set of verses, 40 to 44, Yudhishthira retires, not depending on brothers, traveling to the north. Vishja tatrata sarvam dukula valayadikam nirmamo nirankara sanchina shesha bandana. Yudhishthira at once relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments for royal order, and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. To become purified of material contamination is the necessary qualification for becoming one of the associates of the Lord. I will repeat. To become purified of material contamination is the necessary qualification for becoming one of the associates of the Lord. We should frame this. Try to ask the question, how many of us would love to become eternal associates of the Lord, or regain that position to become eternal associates of the Lord? Everyone pick up their hands. What is the qualification? What is the necessary qualification? And Prabhupada is giving us the necessary qualification to become purified of material contamination. This is the practicality of going back to Godhead. This is the practicality of becoming an associate of the Lord, is to become purified of material contamination. If we do not understand what is material contamination, then we will entrap ourselves and not be purified. So purification is very, very necessary. No one can become an associate of the Lord or can go back to Godhead without such purification. So you can't cut corners. You can't gate crash. You have to be pure. Now, can the Lord instantly purify someone who's sinful and take them back home? Yes. Consider Putana. Krishna took her back home. She just, when she came to kill Krishna, she must have killed a few babies. So she had a stock of sinful activities to suffer. But Krishna purified her, took her back home. So can Krishna take us home like instantly? Yes. But Prabhupada said that's like getting an honors degree in the university. You get a free certificate, honorary certificate, without going through the university. For the majority, they have to register in university, go attend classes, study, pass the exam and then be successful. So we need to go through that process, and that process is the process of purification. Therefore, whenever we on this path of purification and we have the opportunity to purify our life, engage in devotional service, we should be excited, we should be happy, we should be blissful. Why? Because that is how we go back home, back to Godhead. So we should be excited about purifying our existence. Yudhishthira, therefore, to become spiritually pure, at once gave up his royal opulence, relinquishing his royal dress and garments. The kashaya or saffron loincloth of a sannyasi indicates freedom from all attractive material garments, and thus he changed his dress accordingly. He became disinterested in his kingdom and family, and thus became free from all contamination or material designation. People are generally attached to various kinds of designations of family, society, country, occupation, wealth, position, and many others. As long as one is attached to such designations, he is considered materially impure. See how wonderful Prabhupada starts off the purport by giving the sutra for perfection, the sutra for becoming an associate of the Lord. That means to become purified of material contamination. Then using the example of Yudhishthira, why Yudhishthira was doing what he was doing is he was becoming free. He became disinterested in his kingdom and family and became free from all material contamination or material designations, which means material contamination and material designations are synonyms. People are generally attached to various kinds of designations of family. This is my family. This is my wife, husband, my society, my country. I'm South African, American. My occupation, I'm a doctor. My wealth, I'm wealthy. My position, I'm a temple president, I'm a commander, and many others. As long as we have these upadhis, these designations, it means, Prabhupada says, as long as one is attached to such designations, you're holding on, you're having this, that you're keeping, then he's considered materially impure. As long as you are materially impure, then your chances of going back to Godhead is going to be obstructed. Yes, can Prabhupada's mercy take you home? Yes. Can the mercy of the Vaishnavas take you home? Yes. Can Krishna take you home? Yes. But that is mercy. So we want to endeavor to qualify and then depend on mercy. Don't just cross your fingers and your toes and wait for mercy. No. Act, endeavor, purify, and then cross your toes and fingers and beg for mercy. The so-called leaders of men in the modern age are attached to national consciousness, but they do not know that such false consciousness is also another designation of the materially conditioned soul. One has to relinquish such designations before one can become eligible to go back to Godhead. Foolish people adore such men who die in national consciousness. But here is an example of Yudhishthira, a royal king who prepares himself to leave this world without such national consciousness. Oh, I'm dying for South Africa. Yep, you're going to come back as a cockroach in South Africa. So we don't want to be attached to any form of designation. And yet he is remembered even today because he is a great pious king, almost on the same level with the Supreme Personality of God at Sri Ram. And because people of the world were dominated by such pious kings, they were happy in all respects. And it was quite possible for such great emperors to rule the world. So this is what's required. We need a Mahabhagavad king like Yudhishthira Maharaj to rule this world if we want happiness. 41. Vacham juhava manis manasi tat prana itarechatam rutyavapanam sotshargam tampachatve yajo havid. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breath, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. So Maharaj Yudhishthira is using a specific process, it's reversing the process of material creation, reverse engineering, to unwind everything back, to return back to the kingdom of God. Maharaj Yudhishthira, like his brother Arjuna, began to concentrate and gradually become free from all material bondage. First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind, because the mind is the master of all senses. Or in other words, he turned his mind towards the transcendental service of the Lord. He prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions and reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards transcendental service of the Lord. So we can see how important service is. As our time ticks more and more, we want to increase our service to the Supreme Lord more and more and more. From 2 hours to 5 hours to 10 hours to 20 hours to 24 hours. We want to be fully engaged in the service of Krishna. There was no longer a need for material activities. Actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are a reflection of the eternal soul. But the quality of the activities can be changed from method to transcendental service of the Lord. The material color of the mind is changed when one washes it clean of the contamination of life breathing, and thereby frees it from the contamination of repeated birth and deaths, and situates it in pure spiritual life. All is manifested by the temporary embodiment of material body, which is a production of the mind at the time of death. And if the mind is purified by the practice of transcendent loving service to the Lord and is constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is no more chance of the mind's producing another material body after death. It will be freed from the absorption in material consciousness. The pure soul will be able to return home back to Godhead. So this is the process of purification, of absorption. Engage all our objects of senses in the service of the Lord by engaging in devotional service through the senses, through the mind, through the intellect. In this way, completely dedicating ourselves in the transcendental service of the Lord. 42. Tritve hutva cha panchatvam tachchaikatve juhon muni sarvam atman yajuva juvid brahmanyatmana avyaye. Thus annihilating the gross bodily of 5 elements into the 3 qualitative modes of material nature, he merged the modes into one nishanas and then absorbed that nishanas into the self Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. All that is manifested in the material world is a product of the Mahatattva Abhyakta. The things that are visible to our material vision are nothing but a combination and permutations of such variegated material products. But the living entity is different from such material products. It is due to the living entity's forgetfulness of his eternal nature as an eternal servant of the Lord and his false conception of being a so-called Lord of material nature that he is obliged to enter into existence of false sense enjoyment. Prabhupada is revealing our mistake, the living entity's forgetfulness of his eternal nature as an eternal servant of the Lord. And when, because of this mistake, then he develops a false conception of being so-called Lord of material nature. And because of this, he's obliged to enter into the existence of false sense enjoyment. So our forgetfulness leads to a misconception of being the Lord, and our forgetfulness of being an eternal servant of Krishna leads us to this material world, and in this material world there is only a false perspective or perception of sense enjoyment. We're experiencing the reflection, and no matter how much and how long you try to enjoy the reflection of a mango tree reflected in the river, you will never ever be able to hold the mango or even enjoy the mango. So you can't enjoy the mango because you can't even hold it. As soon as you grab it, the reflection comes out of your hand. So our real enjoyment is in the spiritual world. Thus, a committant generation of material energies is the principal cause of the mind's being material affected. Thus, the gross body of 5 elements is produced. Yudhishthira reversed the action and merged the 5 elements of the body in the 3 modes of material nature. Thus, the qualitative distinction of the body as being good, bad, or mediocre is extinguished. And again, the qualitative manifestation become merged in the material energy, which is produced from a false sense of the pure living being. When one is thus inclined to become an associate of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, in one of the innumerable planets of the spiritual sky, especially Goloka Vrindavan, one has to think always that he is different from the material energy. He has nothing to do with it. And he has to realize himself as pure spirit Brahman, qualitatively equal with the Supreme Brahman, Parameshwar. I'm going to repeat that again. When one is inclined, that inclination, that desire, that aspiration comes through association. And when you are convinced that you want to become inclined to become an associate of the Supreme Lord, the person of Godhead, in one of the many planets, Vaikuntha planets. So Krishna consciousness is not restricted only to people who are Krishna bhaktas, Krishna associates. No. If you want to go to Lord Nrsingadeva's planet or Vara's planet or any other planet in Vaikuntha, Vishnu planet, Ram planet, Ayodhya, doesn't matter. If that is your eternal relationship, then through the process you will get there. Prabhupada is encouraging, especially for Goloka Vrindavan, because that's the highest planet. Then what must one do? One has to think always that he's different from the material energy. You have to keep that thought 24 hours a day in your mind. I'm not this body. I'm not part of this material energy. I am spiritual, pure spirit. I have nothing to do with matter. So that thinking should always be there, and he has to realize himself as pure spirit. So thinking, fantastic, but realization has to be there. I want to practice the process of Krishna consciousness and beg Krishna's mercy so that I will come to this point of always remembering, being aware of my position, and realizing I'm pure spirit soul. That means I can see, if I look in the mirror, I don't see Indian, I don't see male, female. I see pure spirit. I see true male, female, and I see the spirit soul in the region of the heart. I see me. That is a realization. And then further, one can see one's relationship in association with Krishna as a servant, as a friend, as a parent, as a conjugal lover. Yudhishthira, after distributing his kingdom to Parikshit and Vajra, did not think himself emperor of the world or head of the Kuru dynasty. This sense of freedom from material relations, as well as freedom from material engagement of the gross and subtle encirclements, make one free to act as the servant of the Lord, even though one is in the material world. So this is the process. When we're dying, this is the consciousness and the stages we need to go through. We should not be relating. We're dying. We are on a deathbed. We should not be relating to family members, to this material world. The gate to the spiritual is opening. We need to understand that gate of consciousness and enter. This is the stage of Jivan Mukta stage or liberated stage, even in the material world. This is the process of ending material existence. One must not only think that he is Brahman, but must act like Brahman. And you can only act like Brahman, you can only act as a servant of Krishna when you realize you're a servant of Krishna. So yes, knowing you're a servant of Krishna is good. Knowing your spirit soul is good. But acting like the spirit soul, that is required. Therefore, Prabhupada says, anyone who's engaging in devotional service, even though he's a conditioned soul, is really on the highest platform of existence. Why? Because he's engaging on the platform of pure devotional service, or the level of the nature of the soul, which is to act in service to Krishna, even in the material world. To be engaged in devotional service is a very, very glorious activity. We should not underestimate having the opportunity to engage in devotional service. One only thinks himself Brahman is an impersonalist, and one who acts like Brahman is a pure devotee. 43. Chiravasha niraharo baddhavan mukta murtaja darshayan atmano rupam joda matta vichachavat anevek samona niragad ashrin van vadiroyata. After that, Yudhishthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing, because he's becoming indifferent to this world. And his goal now focus is back to Godhead. Thus, being freed from all external affairs, he had nothing to do with the imperial life or false prestige. And for all practical purpose, he posed himself exactly like an inert mad urchin and did not speak of material affairs. He had no dependence on his brothers, who had all along been helping him. This stage of complete independence from everything is also called the purified stage of fearlessness. Now, at least in Krishna consciousness, we are fortunate that we can take shelter and depend on the devotees of the Lord. So if we are leaving this world, the devotees can create a favorable environment to facilitate and help us to live. And identifying ourselves as part of Srila Prabhupada's family, as part of the devotee family, as part of Krishna's family, that identity we can revive. So we want to remove the identity that I belong of this world, of this family, of this country, of this nation, of this species, to the fact that I belong to Krishna's family, to Goloka Vrindavan. That's the relationship we want to revive. To Prabhupada's family, that's the relationship I want to revive. Family of Krishna, Achyuta Gotra, family of Krishna. Then, next text. Just give me 1 sec. Text 44. Udichim pravishveshan sham gatapurvam hatmabi ridi brahma param dhyayan navartate yatogata. He then started towards the north, trending the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he lived in that way wherever he went. It is understood from this verse that Yudhishthira followed in the footsteps of his forefathers and the great devotees of the Lord. We have discussed many times before that the system of Varnashram Dharma, as it was strictly followed by the inhabitants of the world, specifically by those who inhabited the Arya Bharata province of the world, emphasizes the importance of leaving all household connections at a certain stage of life. The training and education was so imparted, and thus a respectable person like Mahayudhishthir had to leave all family connections for self-realization and going back to Godhead. No king or respectable gentleman would continue family life till the end, because that was considered suicidal and against the interest of the perfection of human life. You notice this sentence is exactly the same like Prabhupada ended off the previous purport. In other words, to be free from family encumbrances and devote oneself 100% to devotional service of Lord Krishna. This system is always recommended for everyone because it is the path of authority. The Lord instructs in Bhagavad Gita 1862 that one must become a devotee of the Lord at least at the last stage of one's life. A sincere soul of the Lord, like Mahayudhishthir, must abide by this instruction of the Lord for his own interest. The specific words Brahma Param indicate Lord Shri Krishna. This is corroborated in the Bhagavad Gita 10:13 by Arjuna with reference to great authorities like Ashita, Devala, Narad, and Vyas. Thus, Mahayudhishthir, while leaving home for the north, constantly remembered Lord Shri Krishna within himself, following in the footsteps of his forefathers, as well as the great devotees of all time. And thus, we end this section of verses, the exemplary example of Yudhishthir Maharaj leaving this world, becoming detached, focused, and absorbed in going back home, back to God. And we see in the Mahabharata, or we read in the Mahabharata, how they went, Yudhishthir Maharaj went to see the hellish planets. He was taken to hell, then he was taken to heaven. Again, for those who are involved in hearing the Mahabharata, Krishna is presenting different scenarios, but the Bhagavatam is presenting a higher perspective. The Pandavas are eternal associates, so therefore, when they leave, they will return back to the spiritual worlds. The journey, temporary journey in between now and going back home, that may be for different lessons that Krishna is presenting to us. But ultimately, we know that those who are dedicated to serving Krishna, remembering Krishna, who are loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their destination is back to the spiritual world, back home, back to Godhead. Vantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Go Pramanande Hari Hari. All right, if there are any questions or comments, please type that in the chat. We'll just give devotees a few minutes. Shamananda Prabhu says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, really amazing purports filled with info for us to take advantage of. These pastimes of Mahayudhishthir and the Pandavas retiring are really wonderful to hear. Srila Prabhupada mentions below in Srimad Bhagavatam lecture, Yudhishthir Maharaj saw age of Kali coming. Just like winter season, you cannot check it. So Kali, also another phase, can't check it. Decide to retire. One may have to do, one may say, have to do duty, etc. But one must retire also, not to work until end of life. Yes. We have our duty. Isn't it interesting? No, Prabhu, I have my duty. Oh yes, you have your duty to your family. What about your duty to your eternal family? I have my duty to my parents. Yes. What about your duty to your eternal parents? I have my duty to my grandfather. Yes. What about your duty to Srila Prabhupada as your eternal grandfather? So Yes, nobody's saying don't do your duty, but don't keep doing your duty till you die and forget about your supreme responsibility and task, as Prabhupada has shared. The beauty of Krishna consciousness is you can do both. You can engage in doing your duties even now, at the same time engage in devotional service even now. Don't wait for death. If we see the Pandavas, look at their life was exemplary in that they were devotees of Krishna. It wasn't that Yudhishthira Maharaj now is preparing to become a devotee. No, now he's preparing to go back home, not becoming a devotee. So we also should not wait till death to become fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness and devotional service. We need to cultivate Krishna consciousness right now by chanting the holy names, by engaging in devotional service as much as possible. We need to become attached, insanely attached to chanting, to serving, to hearing the glories of Krishna. So that when death comes, it's a transition, it's a natural process. We won't be disturbed. But if you haven't become attached to Krishna through hearing, chanting, serving, engaging, etc., then it will be a challenge. So we have to follow in the examples of these great souls. All right, thank you very much. We will end. All right, Bafana Prabhu has sent a message. In closing, can it not though be considered as the same principle if family designation, if one identify oneself as part of Krishna consciousness? What is your response? So if you are identifying yourself as part of, let's say, the family of Krishna consciousness, right? That means the family of the devotee association. I identify myself as a congregational member of Midran, of Santon, of Lanesia, of Pretoria. So you have an identity in relation to a institution within this world, or I'm part of a Namahata. So that is one designation. Then you may have a designation of a position of service in the community of the family of Krishna consciousness. Now, every one of those designations can have a material tinge related to it. Just like I am part of the Vaishnavi Namahata. So I may start my journey by being part of a Vaishnavi Namahata, but I am not, or if I maintain that I'm a female and therefore I belong to this Namahata of females, that is a designation. So one has to rise above all material designation. I'm a temple president, which is in relation to Krishna. That's glorious, that's wonderful, but I cannot keep maintaining that. One has to give up all the upadhis, and it has to become purified. So the only upadhi, the only designation is Jivera Swarupa Krishna Nitya Das. I'm eternal servant of Krishna, full stop. No other designation has to be there. So yes, it is conducive for the process of bhakti to have some sort of identification. It's better that I identify myself with a family of Krishna consciousness than a family of drunkards, a family of asuras, right? A family of materialistic people, a family of exploiters. So that is the beginning, that is the start, that is conducive, but that is not perfection. Perfection means when you realize I am simply a servant of Krishna. So it'll help, it'll guide, but we need to rise above. Yudhishthir's story of family renunciation sounds so much like Lord Ram's highest qualities of detachment in the green, without fail to renounce there to Bharat at the will of his deadly thinking of stepmother. He was not deterred by going into the forest, and his life there is as though you can actually live there. He was determined to come back at the end. If for 14 years, I see so much similarities, though I acknowledge the discourse as explained. Yes, the aspect of renouncing our selfish interest, things related to this world, and taking up a higher service, a higher perspective. Lord Ramachandra naturally had a higher vision, higher purpose to destroy the demons. And he was happy to honor his father's wish for a higher purpose. So we also want to sacrifice for a higher purpose. And in that way, perfect our life and return back to the spiritual world. That is what the Lord wants. That is what his associates want. That is what Srila Prabhupada wants. That is what the devotees want of all of us. So we also should want that. By engaging nicely in devotional service, using as much of our time, all of our time in rendering service, without forsaking the responsibilities we have in this world. See the responsibilities in relation to Krishna, see what one has in terms of family, work, etc., as Krishna giving us that, so that we could increase our surrender and service to Krishna. Thank you very much. Vantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai, Pramanande, Hari Hari.